if you're streaming. I think I'm gonna spend 1 hour here today. I spend some time on the Buildspace event, listening to people on the chat, and studying. So this is why I'm not gonna have a lot of time to stream today. But I was thinking about, and I spent a lot of time thinking about this and watching a bunch of videos to understand how it works and the similarities between both frameworks or libraries. And I think that I decided to just delete everything from this one and just leave the stuff related to the event listeners, because I'm spending too much time trying to decide like what parts of this I should change or leave the same, and I think it's kind of like a waste of time, because I'm not changing because I'm not really sure if it's like the correct way or if I'm gonna be doing things in the same way that the VGS did or not. So for example, the camera state, I think is the part that I'm spending the most time thinking about, which is that this class has the camera, let me see. Yeah, this thing here. And I realized that on the other project, this is the file that is responsible for pretty much doing the same thing. Because WebGL is a lot more complicated in the way that it works, and you have to do a bunch of calculations, then you need to create like a bunch of more functions. And this is the reason why I think that he separated this into a whole nother file, and is these enormous functions here. But on here is just this object, so because it's a lot more simple. But the thing is, I'm not 100% sure if that's the case or not, because there's still the thing that I'm not really clear about, which is the relationship between the canvas and the camera. So this is the stuff that I'm kind of stuck at, and I can't really figure out based on all the videos that I watched, like if it makes sense. But I think that from the way that I'm thinking now, the camera is not related to, like the camera is just a point of view inside of the canvas. But from here, it seems like they are doing calculations based on the canvas itself to change the point of view. But on this map controls is different because you're using matrices to do the calculations. So the other one, you also use matrix, but it's more simple because it's just 2D. But the thing is, when you incorporate 3D, you have this thing called field of view, which is like the same way that I was thinking in my mind, which is just a projection. It's kind of like a projector. And the reason why is because you have to represent the distance in 3D. So objects that are further away should be smaller, and that are closer away should be bigger. And because of that, there's a bunch of different calculations that you have to do based on angles. And you also have to do some stuff with vectors that I don't understand really well yet. And it seems like this file is the thing that is doing all these calculations with these variables here. And then it is updating the state of the camera through all these calculations here. But on this one is updating just based on the position of the X and Y from the canvas, and converting from DOM to canvas. So, but the thing is, I'm not 100% sure if like is the same thing or not, if I should just remove. So what I'm thinking about doing now is just make the camera state equal to the create map controls. And then I'm just gonna remove the functions here, and I'm just gonna make this file to be exactly the same as this one. And then like, because the whole point of the thing that I'm doing is just I'm like adding an extra layer and adding functionality. So the way that I'm thinking now in my mind is that the create scene is like the canvas class, the create map controls is like the camera state, and the view matrix is like the view on the body here, this view here. And the reason for creating the network class is like I'm creating an extra layer because I'm gonna add more stuff than this one doesn't have. But yeah, this one has the create graph scenes as well. But the create graph scene, which was the file that I was using before to create the nodes and do like the portion, like the elements, calculate the positions of the elements and all of this kind of stuff. In this project is the canvas renderer. So the canvas renderer would be the create graph scene. So, and then I have to do the other stuff to add the extra stuff that VGS has and that the other library doesn't have. But I know that create graph scene also uses the forest layout stuff and is using another physics engine, and I think that's going to be the part that is complicated. But what I'm thinking about doing, just like delete everything from this one and then just do exactly the same as it is on here and just leave the extra stuff, which is the event listeners on this one, and remove the eventify from this one. And then after that, I think I'm gonna do the simplest way first. Like I'm just gonna do it exactly the same way I was doing before. The only difference is that now I'm gonna initialize in this class the thing, and then I'm gonna use like the canvas renderer is gonna be exactly the same functions that is actually the same file that the create graph scene was before. And then I'm just gonna do like the very simple layout first, so I can create the function and do the visualization and then ship, then get the link to submit to the first week. And then after I do that, then I'm gonna think about how to remove the forest layout from ngraph and then use the physics engine instead. And then what I'm gonna do is just study from the way that they do it on VGS and then see how can I make it happen with WebGL based on the way that it is on this other library here. But it's very tricky because like I'm not still, there's a bunch of stuff to learn and it's very complicated. So, and I'm not like, I'm kind of concerned about deleting this because there's so much stuff here. Then like my concern is that it defeats the point of doing all of this stuff later on if I delete the, but I think it's just one of those things where just paralysis by analysis kind of thing, because there's so many things. And here, that's the other thing that I spend a lot of time thinking about. But I think what I'm gonna have to do is just move all of this stuff here. I don't understand why they created a separate function for this, but the problem is that there's a lot of code here. But I think I'm gonna have to move all of this stuff to the beginning of the thing there. And then just remove this function. So I'm gonna have to move this to the constructor, but I'm not 100% sure like if this is a good way to do things. I would have to, I think if it comes after, it doesn't matter, because it's just binding. Because on this one, like all these things are inside of that function, but it just calls this function right after it initializes the canvas. So I'm not 100% sure why they did it this way. But the problem is that I think I need to initialize the canvas on the constructor, because in this class here, like these methods in the beginning need to have, and I think I'm gonna have to pass as this, like I'm gonna pass the context instead of creating this. I'm still not sure if I should create this or not, to be honest. The draw context, because I don't know like what is the point of creating this and not just making all the variables separate. Because yeah, this one I know that it is passing the API here to the other file, to the camera controller. And what I'm gonna do is just pass the context, I think. So I'm gonna pass as this, which is gonna be the instance of the canvas, instead of passing like this. And then I'm just gonna make all these functions part of the class. There's so much stuff here. So let me see. Where's the, I think I need to erase the stuff that I put before and then just make it equal to this instead of making equal to variables. So first I initialize all of this stuff, because I was making equal to variables because I was creating the canvas outside there. but now I'm going to create it on the constructor here, so I can make it equal to this, because some of this stuff is going to depend on the canvas. I'm not sure. The other debate I have in my mind is whether or not to make it accept the canvas already instead of accepting the element, or accepting the element. And the issue with this difference is that because I didn't look too much into the other parts of the VGS library. Not sure if it's a library or framework, because there's a lot of stuff on this, but I'm not really sure if the other, like the thing is, the other stuff that maybe want to do things the way that I'm doing now is because I looked into a bunch of the functions in VGS, and a bunch of them use the other repository, which is visutil. And then I realized that, like, I had the idea of creating another file just to see how many things I can remove and still have the graph. But then I realized that I have to build the network to make it work, because the way that it works is you build it, and then it's going to put all the compiled code into a file, and there's going to be different versions there, and then from that file it gets everything that it needs. And also the way that it accepts the way that it accepts the nodes is by creating another class, which is the dataset. And I couldn't figure out where the class was from, because it was from the other repository. And if you go to the source code of the other repository, it's not exactly the same as the imports that it has here. So to get the functions, the source code of the functions, you have to explore that file. And that file is a lot harder to understand because it's all compiled code. Even though I could figure out some of the functions because you just search by the name. So it's not that hard, but it's just really like annoying if I try to do exactly the same. I think it's not the best strategy. It's probably better to just, because obviously I want to get the most out of the libraries, doing the least amount of work, obviously. So I think that the best strategy is to just try to use as much as possible from this one, and then like put VGS like on top of it. But obviously it's complicated because then there's these decisions that is not clear, because if I remove this stuff here, it might change everything else, and then it becomes harder in the future. So it's very difficult to know like what to do. So I think I'm gonna probably remove this and make it to be more similar to this one that accepts the canvas, and I'm just gonna make it like very similar to this because I think it's gonna be easier. Yeah. Hopefully it doesn't fuck me up in the future. So I can remove all of this stuff, and then I just receive the canvas instead of, maybe I put body and then canvas here. I don't know if I should put like this, but I'm just gonna. Yeah, I think this is fine. I think the width and the height I'm gonna get later, because on this class, like the two are very similar, but they are very different at the same time. Like this is why like it's hard to know, because this one also, like on this one, is because on this one it happens on the other layer, in the network layer, that right after it initializes the canvas, it calls the create function, which creates the canvas. And this one, it happens on the canvas layer where it calls this update canvas size in the beginning. So I think that these two things are very similar, but then this one happens on different levels because of the whole design of the project is different. That makes everything different. I should do just GL. And then I should use this dot shell. It's difficult because like I think that I would learn more. I would learn faster if I just try to do things, and that's what I'm trying to like the point I'm trying to get at as fast as possible, where I can just try different things and then see if it renders on the canvas. But the problem is that like it's very hard to decide what kind of stuff to delete and what kind of stuff to add from this one to get to that point. Should I put this input target as well? Because this function is just in case you wanna add something different there, like a different element. To bind event listeners to. I think I'm not gonna put this stuff. And this also probably not. And this is the other thing that I was thinking about, whether or not to leave it with the scene root or make this the scene root by extending the class. I think I'm just gonna extend and then trying to do it like this. The tough part is gonna be when to create the canvas. That's the problem. To create the camera controller. And the view I'm not gonna use. That's the other stuff that I'm not sure, because this is the thing that on this one it was updating the camera based on the view on the body, which is the view here. But this one, it has the view matrix, which is the class. But it has a similar pattern here where it creates the view here, and then it passes this whole thing through the API here to the other one, and then it updates the same view on the context here. So I think I'm going to leave this view as the body, the one on the body, and then I just change the code so that it updates the view on the body instead. And then camera state's gonna be down there because I have to initialize after I do everything. And I think it makes more sense to separate to accept just the canvas and then leave that logic to the application to decide like where to put the canvas. But I think that the reason why VJS does like that is probably because they have all those functionalities to add the filter options on the the site as well. So because of that, they need to control the parent thing where the canvas is at. But I think for my use case, it probably makes more sense to receive just the canvas. And then this stuff I'm gonna remove, obviously, because this is the point of the camera controller thing. And I think that I need to change this as well. I need to move this. And the thing here is that it initializes the. Well, I think I can just get the method. I was gonna talk about the get client rectangle, because here it changes on the function inside of here, but initializes here somewhere. Here it becomes rectangle, but I think I can just initialize as the thing instead of doing inside of the function here. Maybe I would just leave this. I don't know what's the purpose of this frame token, but maybe I'll just leave here. So this stuff I'm not gonna put. Let me see. Oh, it's already here. No, because I did this before. Yeah. Now I think that it sets this up on this inside of this function. And maybe, yeah, that's the thing. I think I can initialize it like this, and then I'll put this stuff inside of the function as well. Like I'll create this function and I'll just copy everything and do it like that. Here, the other difference is that it renders the frame from here. And in the way that I'm gonna do it, it's probably gonna be on the canvas renderer thing, which is the create graph scene on this one. And now I have to think about whether or not I should do this thing here. I don't understand really the point. Maybe it's because this is a function, so... But why put everything here? Because all of the variables are already outside of this. So it would make more sense to just get it from this, but maybe it's because it's not a class, it's a function, so it creates this context. I think I'm just gonna leave it without this stuff here. And then I will figure out what are the differences. So probably gonna call this stuff. And this is, I'm not 100% sure if it's gonna work if I do it like this, but you guys will see. And the stuff related to the render and the clicks, I'm gonna leave. I'm gonna put it on the canvas renderer thing. The thing is, I still don't understand really well how the VGS loads the graph in the beginning, but I think it's just because I think the way that it does it is with the physics actually. So I think I actually do understand. So it creates the canvas, and then once you have the canvas, it sets up a bunch of event listeners, and then through the event listeners, it sends the message to the physics engine, and then this physics engine does the initial simulation, and then it uses the other classes as well to help, but it's obviously really complicated. So I'm gonna have to spend a lot more time trying to understand, especially the physics engine. Like, to be honest, I'm not really sure, 100% sure if I'm gonna be able to make it or not, like in 6 weeks. Like, maybe I'll have to settle down for like a very like basic version, because I think it's gonna be very difficult to change the physics engine to work with WebGL. Like, my hope is that this becomes a lot easier because I have the other library, so it's helpful. But it's gonna be very challenging, I think. I think that the equations from what I've seen on VGS is, like, they don't seem that hard, but I think it becomes a lot harder when you have this, like the WebGL, because then you have to think about this, like, it's a bunch of calculations on matrices and angles and then vectors, and I have to understand a lot more, like, how it works. But I think that the parts like outside are a lot easier than, like, this is the hardest part, I think, understanding the canvas. Like, building the website and all of the other stuff is probably very easy compared to building the simulation. And yeah. So I'm just making sure, like, maybe I should put this here as well. But I don't think that makes sense. I think I'll have to initialize this whatever it is used. This is just related to clicks, so then I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna put there. I think that's pretty much it. Now I'm gonna remove the other one. Let me think. I want to make sure that I'm not missing anything that is necessary. But I think what I'm gonna do is just remove the create function, and I'm just gonna leave it like this, and then I'm gonna remove from the network. I think if here I should change as well, because obviously I'm not using this anymore. And then I guess I can just append to the canvas. The thing is that like it's a weird feeling because I feel like it's not that hard to understand, like the math behind it and the calculations and this stuff, but like it becomes really hard because the project is very complex and there's a bunch of things going on. So it's very difficult to decide like the challenge is figuring out how to incrementally learn, because that's the biggest problem is like if you're watching tutorials or learning that way, then like it's a lot easier because you can start from the beginning. But then the problem is like as I'm watching those tutorials, I don't know how to incorporate from the stuff that I already have now, because this is already built stuff. So it's very hard to think about, because at the same time I don't want to start from the complete scratch and then just build something like simple. But maybe that's what I should be doing, like create another project and just like try to do stuff, a bunch of stuff. But yeah, I think that's not probably the best approach. I think that the middle way is probably the best. Should try to incorporate. So I just need to get to the point where from this library here, I have the functionality from VJS, and then I can start changing the stuff on this library to see how the animation is going to change. And I think that at that point, it's going to become a lot more clear on how the whole pipeline of the graph animation works. But it's really hard to get to that point, especially the physics engine. That's the one that I'm the most concerned about, because I know that like everything's gonna change and it's gonna be really hard to know how to change the engine so that it works. Yeah, this is the thing. I don't understand why do this draw context here. I mean, thinking about how I should deal with the height and width here. Maybe I should just initialize to null here, or to undefined, and then on the thing I update. I think that's what I'm gonna do. Or maybe I should delete this function first. I think these ones I'm gonna delete also. The thing is, I don't know, like, what is the equivalent here, if the way that I'm thinking about it makes sense or not. Because here there are functions as well that gets the coordinates from the DOM and the canvas, but like I don't understand what should be the relationship between the camera and the canvas. If the camera should always be the same size as the canvas, so it is pretty much the canvas. But the reason why people give a different name is because the camera represents like the point of view that the canvas is looking at, and the canvas, the camera represents the point of view, and the canvas itself represents the object in the dome. I think that's what makes sense in my mind, but so it's hard to be 100% sure that the functions here that get the coordinates are supposed to be similar to these ones. I think they are, but I'm not really sure. So, like I said, it's probably the best thing is just to remove these things here and then just leave these ones. And then I just keep stuff from VGS that is related to the event listeners and to the physics animation. So I think I'm gonna delete everything. Let's actually it here. Then instead of this one, I I'm just gonna copy this. Not sure if it makes sense. Sure. Add the comments. And I'm gonna leave it like this just because there was a comment before, so. Oh, let me think. This is supposed to be the actual canvas, not the context, so. And here I'm not 100% sure if it makes sense. Sure. I think it is unnecessary, but I'm gonna leave it like this for now. Because I'm already initializing this in the constructor now. And then this just remove. Maybe here I put this because this would be the root elements. So since I'm extending the class, it's gonna have this thing here because this is from the element class. And the stuff that I don't understand really well as well is that here is just calling this library and then calling the function. I assume that whenever this happens is because the function itself makes the change on the whatever you pass here. But it feels weird because I think I'm very confident, but not 100% sure that like when you pass things through the function, it's just going to be garbage collected, I think, in most languages. So like if you want the actual object to change, you have to pass as a reference. But I think in JavaScript, maybe it does that automatically for you. So when you call functions like this, it's just going to change this projection here. Actually, I have to change. It should be the one that I have, the one that it has outside of the function. But it feels weird because, like, I think that you would make more sense to return something, or I don't know, to make this equal to a variable. But I think it makes sense. And I'm also gonna study this further later. Just see, to make sure that what I think is happening is happening. So I think when you pass this stuff, you're just gonna change this projection. Hey, yes, Studios. What's up, man? How are you? I am working on something for, it's kind of like a project for, it's like a program where you build an entire application or website or whatever you're doing for 6 weeks. So you start from zero and then you build in 6 weeks. And then first week you just do the first prototype, and then the other weeks you iterate. And then after that you can like there's a big event, like an online event, and you can show like what you build to people. And I'm building something that allows you to visualize scripts in Python, the execution of scripts. And then later on, maybe, I don't know how far I'm gonna go because it's very hard to do. So like I have no idea how long it's gonna take me to be able to do things, to reach certain milestones, let's say. But the idea would be to, like the main goal that I want to accomplish is to be able to make something that allows you to understand much faster what is happening in a complex software application. Because that's has been like a very big problem that I have so far, like studying on my own, is that a lot of the times when you look into these projects, into these GitHub repositories, like there's a bunch of different code and you have no idea like what files are the most important. And because of the Pareto distribution principle, I think that like it's a law of nature that 20% of the functions in the files are going to be the most important in any project. And the other stuff is just going to be like outside things. So like it's always better, I think, to create a hierarchy to study. But if you're just looking at the project, you have no idea. And a lot of the projects don't have like very good documentation, so it's very hard to understand. So my idea should, like with the graph visualization, be able to just look at the graph and have a very good idea of what's going on. And then maybe later on also, and I don't understand why people haven't done this, but maybe it's a lot harder than I think it's gonna be, which to create like a massive database and then associate the geometrical structures of the software with the problems that they solve. and then create like a machine learning algorithms that allow you to like have a good idea of what's going on just based on the geometry of the connections. So pretty much create ways to find connections between what's happening when you're executing code with the stuff that the software is supposed to do, because it's always the same thing. Like the fundamental blocks are always the same. What changes is the scale and the complexity of the geometry depending on what you're trying to do. And the whole point of the building applications is just finding the correct geometrical structure to achieve coordination between different people at some scale. But really hard. So like it's a lot easier saying than to actually do it. Nah, man. Thank you. But I'm very, very far from expert level, man. There's a lot of things that I have to learn. But I think at the same time, like everybody feels this way probably because like in the day and age we are living, like things are gonna advance exponentially faster because of AI and technology. So yeah, it is similar. It's not PHP, but it's JavaScript. Uh, so it's both JavaScript and Python initially. There may be in the very far future Rust as well. But yeah, like Python is the easiest because it's the one that I like started in the beginning, and I looked into all of this stuff like a long time ago, and I had this idea in the back of my mind for a long time. But then I decided like to do it because it's a perfect opportunity to be like to do it on this Buildspace thing. But it's very complicated, so like I'm concerned that I'm not gonna be able to do it because like the physics engine of like it looks very simple, but it's really hard to do all the calculations. I'm using right now is Svelte. I decided to use Svelte because I thought it would be easier to manipulate the canvas with Svelte, because I tried to build a canvas thing with Next.js before, and it wasn't like very nice. It was really hard. So I decided to do it with Svelte, but it's the same problem, and I just didn't. The problem is that I didn't understood like what the issue is, and the issue is that most of these frameworks, they render everything on the server side, and the canvas happens on the client side. So there's a bunch of stuff that goes on under the hood that makes everything problematic because of the update cycle of the applications that I don't understand really well. So that's the problem. Because Next.js, it updates the state of the website, and like the canvas has the frame rate, and it gets very complicated. But then people build libraries, and that makes it easier. So like I thought that Svelte would be better, but it's pretty much the same thing. But it's gonna take me a lot of time to figure out like what is the fundamental problem that is going on, and what happens under the hood. And this is a recurring theme. This is like the main reason why I want to build this stuff here, because I think that this is like something that really lacks, and I don't know why. But there's a lot of content that teaches you how like the simple stuff, but nobody talks about what's happening under the hood. Like what is the fundamental stuff that is going on all these frameworks, and how the code is compiled and interpreted, and what are the differences between different frameworks, and what is happening on memory, and all of this kind of stuff. So it makes it really hard to solve these kinds of problems, or to understand more like why it's so difficult to make the canvas work with these applications. And the other part is the Flask that I'm using. But I'm also thinking about doing a Django API later. Like it depends on what happens in the future, which is very hard to think about. But for now, I think Flask because it's easier. So I decided to do with Flask because it's easier. in the beginning. I think that I did everything on this function, so should probably copy the other functions now, because this one, I think, and all of the other stuff from the beginning, from the constructor is probably fine as well. The hard thing is that I can't really test. I'm gonna have to do everything, like copy everything until I can test if it works or not, because that's the only way that it's gonna render the simulation or the visualization. JavaScript framework that I recommend. What are your goals? I'm not an expert as well. Like I'm just learning like you, but it really depends on what your goals are, I think. And it's a very difficult question to think about. I think this is also one of the biggest problems with the front end right now and JavaScript is because there's like so many things to learn and they keep inventing new frameworks every day, so it's very hard to decide. But I think that the one that people recommend the most is probably Next.js, which is built on top of React. So React is a framework. They say it's a library, but I've heard more people say that is a framework because there's so much stuff on it. And then Next.js is built on top of React, as far as I understand. And it allows server-side rendering. So to get a job, I think Next.js is probably the best. And it's also very good. I really liked, but it's hard to learn in the beginning, I think. And the other ones I don't have experience with. But yeah, the main ones are Next.js, Vue. Then some people say Angular, but I think Angular is an older one. So yeah, Next.js, Vue. And there's another one, I think, but I forgot. Yeah, Vue.js. PHP, I think, is not that good. But maybe it is because there's a lot of applications that use PHP as well. So maybe it's good to know. I think that WordPress uses PHP and WordPress is very big. But the thing is that in the future, I think it's going to decline a lot. And yeah. React is the most popular one, I think, nowadays. So I think I'm gonna copy these functions one by one and then delete some of the ones that I have there. And set options I'm probably gonna leave because I think I'm gonna leave this one here. And this one I'm probably gonna call the other function to resize. And this is the stuff that I was talking about in the beginning where it's hard to know. because I don't really know very well, like if this file here is analogous to this one. So here is obviously manipulating, like changing the size of the canvas, and it's changing the size of the canvas and the thing there in the body, on the body, the view on the body that had the translation, I think. It's gonna do that with the set camera state. But because I'm using WebGL, I think that it is different, because the view is gonna be a bunch of matrix and it's gonna be the file instead of the object. So on the resize, I should probably call this other function that this file has. Maybe we should do just update canvas size, but it's the same thing. So I think that should probably delete the set size as well and just leave the update canvas size. Maybe I should leave the same name. I should rename, because it might be easier on the other files to understand. I think I'm gonna do that. Now there's another. Yeah, I won't resize. I don't need to leave this thing here. I think these functions I'm gonna leave here because I don't understand what is the equivalent on the other one. I know that, like, from the videos that I've seen, I think you need to change the vector. Like there's an up the vector, and then there's the matrix and something else. That when you're scaling, you need to change that in the projection, because the nature of the thing, it is 3D. So like it would be obviously different than the function here, but because I don't know, I think it's better to just leave it like it is here. And then later on, I decide whether or not, like, once I have more understanding of how to update the scale on the view here, maybe I can change this function to update the view matrix based on the pixel ratio. And this one, I've used ChatGPT to try to understand, and also is a bunch of calculations on the matrix. And I think that I'm gonna have to change the view matrix to, because the WebGL context doesn't have this function, and what this function does is it scales the context, I think. So the first one is the x axis, and this one is the y axis, I think, or vice versa. And then the other are some other properties that I don't remember. But then to do that with WebGL is going to be different, but I don't know, like, if there's a similar one here. And the thing is that, like, on this one, it might be, the functions might be inside of the camera controller thing, the other file. So This can be like a bit confusing, I think. It's also doing this, so you should put GL and then get context. But or I should just put this.gl there. So I think I'm gonna leave this one here. I think I'm gonna stop here because the timer is up. And I'm gonna probably off stream, I'm just gonna pass all of these functions to this class here. I think prepare value, maybe this is related to changing the values based on the way that it is there, like the way that you pass, just in case you pass as a pixel or a percentage, I think. So I'm not sure if I'm gonna use, but I think I'm gonna leave it here. And I think that set camera state I'm just gonna change because the way that I'm gonna do it now is with the other one. Is with the functions on the controller file. Yeah, I'll think about it because the thing that I don't know is that like what level is gonna be, because maybe it makes sense to leave this function here and then I change the camera state there through that function. The camera state here. But maybe it makes more sense. I think I'm gonna try to emulate as much as possible this one. And then yeah, just emulate as much as I can this one, and then just try to add the extra stuff from VGS on this one. So I have the least amount of work possible, and I can gain the most from that work. Yeah, today I just did 1 hour because there was an event on Buildspace, and then I spent some time there on the Discord, listening to people talk about what they're doing. But I think I'm gonna try during this Buildspace time that I'm gonna be working on this stuff. I'm gonna try to spend more time. But usually I do 1 hour and a half every day, or close to every day, like as often as I can. Unless there like something happens and then like I have to do other stuff off stream. But yeah, usually I do 1 hour and a half. But I think I'm gonna try to do like maybe at least 2 hours or maybe something like that, maybe more during the build space stuff, because I wanna make sure that I like do the most that I can to at least have something at the end of the 6 weeks. And it's very hard because streaming sometimes like it helps, but at the same time it becomes more difficult because you have the extra like pressure of knowing that this stuff is going to be recorded and it's going to stay on YouTube. So like sometimes it's easier to work off stream, but sometimes it helps as well because it helps you like stay focused on what you're doing. So it's like a double-edged sword. But yeah. So I'm gonna stop today now. So yeah, probably gonna come back tomorrow. So see you then.